You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hello, everyone. This is Connor. I'm Representative Christy Houlihan's Communications Director. I wanted to welcome you to our Small Business Telephone Town Hall. Just to make sure we can all hear, please press 3 if you can hear me. Perfect. Okay. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to the Congresswoman. We will be taking questions later after opening remarks. If at any point you do have a question, please press 3, and that will let us know. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Congresswoman Houlihan. Congresswoman Houlihan, you should be on the line now.
Is this, Connor, this is Christy. Have we connected with everybody so far?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And we're beginning. Excellent. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Sorry I had a little bit of a technical glitch and had to dial back in. Thank you so much for joining us all this afternoon. This marks our third coronavirus telephone town hall that's focused exclusively on promoting and protecting our small businesses. We've participated in a lot of other conversations across our community during the pandemic to speak and hear from our small business owners as well, but this is the third formal one of these. And I would again recommend for those of you who are here, having a pencil or a pen with paper available in case you want to write down any of the contact information or information that we're providing today. A lot of information also can be found on our website as well. I'm personally a former small business owner and operator in our community, and so I very much understand and know firsthand the struggles that we are all undergoing as being small business owners and operators, and I know that they are particularly exacerbated by this crisis. I know that from talking to so many of you that you are facing very tough questions as Chester County and Berks County are now entering the yellow phase and hopefully, I hope, heading for the green phase as well. I very much believe, as I know you all do, that the small business community is the backbone of our economy, not just here in Chester and Berks County, but in our Commonwealth and our country as well. And when our small businesses succeed, certainly our economy writ large succeeds as well. And when small businesses fail, of course, so does our economy. So in Congress, I'm trying to do everything I possibly can be to be an advocate for our community, to deliver the much needed relief that many of you all are rightfully demanding. And this is certainly not a time, as I've tried to emphasize through this entire time, for partisan politics, because the health of our citizenry and our economy is directly on the line. So as your representative, I'll take a couple of minutes before we introduce our guests to tell you a few of the actions that have happened in Congress or down in Washington on all of our behalves that I've been supportive of. In Congress, I helped to pass the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which you probably will have heard of referred to as the CARES Act. This was a historic and bipartisan stimulus package that included a mandate to make federally backed low-interest loans and grants available to our country's small businesses. I've also been meeting virtually with our community's small business owners and lending institutions to make sure that I'm able to hear your concerns and to translate that feedback into future legislative actions. And so as a result of those conversations, I mounted an effort to urge House and Senate leadership to pay very special attention to those who had been left behind by that initial legislation, to the unique challenges facing micro businesses and small and sole proprietorships as they try to weather this crisis. So I advocated for the smallest of the businesses in our community so that they would also have access to capital through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and the Paycheck Protection Program. Those are referred to by their acronyms as EIDL and PPP. So you may hear those words in the conversation. Our next stimulus package must address these concerns, and I'll continue to build coalitions to try to get that done on our behalf. Other efforts that I've led thus far have included unlocking the low-interest economic injury disaster loans, or EIDL loans, for Pennsylvania businesses. I led the Pennsylvania delegation, both Democrat and Republican, Senate and House, in urging the SBA to expeditiously grant this request from Governor Wolf. And I'm proud to have helped lead this charge in ensuring that those loans were made available to you as quickly as possible. I also introduced something called the Easing Disruption for America's Small Business Contractor Act of 2020, which is certainly a mouthful. And this legislation would accelerate the payment of federal contract dollars to small businesses in this time of economic uncertainty. And it would provide small business contractors more time to meet their contract obligations. As you know, the availability of capital is really important. The payment of from your vendors is, from your your business partners is also very important, and this particular bill addresses that issue on the federal level. In the first bipartisan coronavirus relief package, I helped to pass a provision that provides $1 billion in loan subsidies, which would enable the Small Business Administration to provide an estimated $7 billion in low-interest loans to help small businesses affected by the outbreak. And I successfully advocated for making EIDL loans available to our agricultural producers. And that was one of the feedback points that we got pretty early on from our community, was making sure that all people were eligible for EIDL loans, including our extensive agriculture industry in this community. Recently, the House also passed what's called the HEROES Act. And this legislation would, if passed through the Senate, ensure that the Paycheck Protection Program reached underserved communities, including creating a carve-out of 25% of existing funds to be used specifically for small businesses with 10 or fewer employees to guarantee that they are fully able to access PPP assistance. We've seen thus far that the PPP program, although those kinds of businesses are eligible, those kinds of businesses are not as well able to access the capital as we would like them to be. This HEROES Act also creates an additional set of existing funds for the lesser of a 25% or a $10 billion specifically for community financial institutions, such as community development financial institutions, CDFIs, minority development institutions, MDIs, or SBA microlenders. So basically what we're trying to accomplish here in the HEROES Act is to extend and expand the people who can lend and loan that money so that we're able to better penetrate small businesses that may not have existing relationships with banks already. And we're also, through the HEROES Act, trying to make improvements to the PPP loan forgiveness. For example, by adding flexibility to the covered period for borrowers to be extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, and extending the covered period from June 30th to December 31st. We'll hear a little bit about something called the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, which addresses this particular issue as well. The HEROES Act has yet to be brought to the floor of the Senate, and I very much would advocate that you all who are on this call ask your representatives in the Senate to take this bill up, because there is a lot there, not just about small businesses and improving our economy with that way, but also about providing money to our state as well as to our local municipalities, which are very, very much needed at this point in time, because as you can imagine, while your businesses are struggling, revenues for our smaller communities are also struggling as a result, and we are starting to lose essential services as well. Most recently, I also passed the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, which the President has now signed into law because it also was passed by the Senate as well. This bipartisan legislation amends certain loan forgiveness rules and defers payroll taxes for the PPP borrowers. The PPP Flexibility Act increases the current limitation on non-payroll taxes, such as rent and mortgage interest, for the loan forgiveness from 25% to 40%, and it removes retroactive activity on the increase of loan maturity period from 2 to 5 years. So one of the criticisms or feedbacks that we got was that it was just too quick of a turnaround to have to pay the PPP loan back in 2 years. This law extends that to 5. One of the criticisms was that there wasn't enough flexibility on how the money was spent. This law changes the proportions of how the money is spent so that hopefully these modifications will be helpful to you as small business owners and operators. I'm also leading an effort to urge the SBA and Treasury to make demographic information public for SBC oversight to the PPP and EIDL programs. Specifically, we really need to understand demographic information on women and minority-owned businesses and whether or not they have been successfully able to access PPP and EIDL loans. You need to measure, of course, what matters. Data is king. We need to make sure we're understanding who is getting these resources at what amounts and how they are using them. As we continue to combat this pandemic and safely reopen, my office has been and hopefully will continue to be a resource for you and for the community of entrepreneurs and business leaders and employees in our area. So if you're struggling, please do continue to reach out to me and my team. We are here very much to help. As if you've participated in other conversations, you know that we've set up a small business rapid response team, which you can reach, and this is where you might need your pen, by emailing PA06, like the Pennsylvania 6th Congressional District, .smallbusiness@mail.house.gov. Or you can also visit a new page on our website, which is at Houlihan, and Houlihan is spelled HOULAHAN.gov/services/small businesses. And I'll give that information at the end of our call as well. So my hope on this call today is that our panel will be able to get you some answers to some of your questions and concerns. We have on the line today a very cool group of people to talk to us about this. We have Mr. Steve Dixell, who's the District Director of the Eastern Pennsylvania Small Business Administration, or SBA, and we have Mr. Michael Kane, who's the Deputy District Director of the Eastern Pennsylvania Small Business Administration. I'm very, very grateful to have these guests on our call today. The SBA is, of course, very instrumental in helping roll out these very critical small business assistance programs, and I have been and will continue to work aggressively, directly with the SBA to clarify and improve these programs so that everyone in our community who is in need can access these crucial funds. So the structure of today's town hall will be similar to prior town halls. First, Mr. Dixell and Mr. Kane will introduce themselves to the group and will give us an update on how the SBA can be of service during this very difficult and uncertain time. Then we will take your questions. And if you at any point have any questions, please press 3 on your phones, which will indicate to Connor, who's our moderator, that you would like to ask a question. We will do our very best to answer all questions today, but if for some reason we're not able to get to yours, please email your questions to pa06.smallbusiness@mail.house.gov, and we'll make sure to answer you as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for listening to the introduction, and I'm very pleased now to hand it over to Mr. Dixell and to Mr. Kane.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman Houlihan, and thank you for hosting today's Small Business Town Hall meeting. And thank you also, too, for inviting the U.S. Small Business Administration for the opportunity to participate with you here today. We are obviously here to answer everyone's questions and concerns, and if we can't do it by way of this telecon, we'll be happy to do it by phone call or email. As you said, my name is Steve Dixell, and I serve as the District Director for the Small Business Administration in Eastern Pennsylvania, and I'm also joined today by my Deputy District Director, Michael Kane. Together, we lead a great team that is responsible for helping small businesses across the 40 eastern counties of the Commonwealth. And as you know, and as you've heard, and as we know, we are truly in unprecedented times. The COVID pandemic and the subsequent stay-at-home order has substantially impacted small businesses here in Pennsylvania and across the nation. And I want you to know that we here at the SBA are doing everything we can to help small businesses survive this crisis and make it out to the other side through use of the programs you mentioned, such as the Payroll Protection Act and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which go by PPP or EIDL. Here in the Commonwealth, we are proud to report to our community that we've done nearly 160,000 loans in the Payroll Protection Program with over $22 billion in government loan guarantees. Also, Congresswoman, as you mentioned, the most recently passed Payroll Protection Act has provided several much-needed modifications to the original program to benefit all small businesses here in Pennsylvania as well as across the nation. There is an extended maturity of the PPP loans from 2 to 5 years, which can be locally negotiated with lenders. There's also an extension of the payroll coverage from 8 weeks to a maximum of 24 weeks, as you mentioned. And there's also an extension of the timeline to rehire employees before June 30th, 2020 which has now been reset for December 31st, 2020, and a good faith exemption due to the inability to rehire or for a continued impacted business due to federal health guidelines. Also, too, one more important note that we want to make around PPP. There's also a reduction of the mandatory payroll spending that was 75%, which has now been reestablished at 60% for all qualifying loan forgiveness. These changes are incredibly beneficial to small businesses. Again, we thank you for inviting Mike and myself, and I'll turn it over to Mike to introduce himself, as well as take any questions and concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Steve. And this is Mike Kane, Deputy District Director for SBA here in Eastern Pennsylvania, and also fellow constituent. Happy to be a resident here in Congresswoman Houlihan's district. I also wanted to make everyone aware that the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Portal has also been reopened specifically for new applications. So as Congresswoman Houlihan had mentioned earlier, previously the portal had been open for existing applications as well as for new applications specifically for agricultural businesses. And the portal has just been reopened this week specifically for all businesses. So we're very, very excited about that. And obviously this is much needed working capital for small businesses across the Commonwealth, and we're excited, for businesses to be able to begin applying again. So with that, I'll turn that back over to Congresswoman Houlihan. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now we are going to go ahead and transition to any questions that you have. I think that Connor would like to announce again as a reminder how you can ask questions if you're on the line, and I will turn it back over to Connor.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, so if you have any questions at this time, please press 3 on your phone to be entered into the queue. Again, if you have a question, press 3. All right, we've got a few questions. Our first one comes from Rochelle. Rochelle, you should be on the line. Please let us know where you're calling from.
Yeah, hi. I'm calling from my relocated law office in Devon, Pennsylvania, which is my house, which is where I've been working since March. I have a small solo law practice that has been severely affected by this, the economic issue. And it seems that the PPP only applies to people who have a payroll with employees. I have I'm not a payroll employee, but I own the business. I have a couple of contractors. There's a paralegal and a couple of administrative assistants that are associated with the building that I rent from, the suite that I rent from, but they're not my direct employees. However, I do pay for whatever I have them do for me. Does that disqualify me from the PPP? I mean, that seems to be a payroll protection thing. Where would I be applying for money?
Sure. Thanks so much for your question. It's a really, really good one, and I'll have either Steve or Mike, depending on who's available, go ahead and take this.
Hi, Rochelle. This is Mike Kane, and I want to let you know that you are, as a self-employed individual, you are eligible to apply for PPP, even though you are not specifically on, quote-unquote payroll. And what you would do is you would utilize your 2019 net profit as a self-employed individual as a basis for, or what would equate to your payroll. So if you take a look at SBA's website at sba.gov, it outlines all the rules and so forth, including information specifically about self-employed individuals in the frequently asked questions that provide some additional details on that. What you can do is you can apply through the banking institution that you typically bank with. So if you have an existing business banking relationship with a lending institution right now, most likely they're participating in the PPP program. So you're going to want to reach out to them and ask to speak to the business banker who can help you with that. If for some reason, they're no longer offering it, or they have some kind of restrictions or something like that in place, there are plenty of different institutions that we do work with, and there is a Find a Lender system on the SBA website that you can utilize to find a lending institution near you that participates. In terms of your contracted folks, so these are not employees, but these are independent contractors for you, they can apply for PPP loans on their own, because obviously since they're not technically on payroll, they don't serve as employees for you, you wouldn't be able to factor them in specifically to your payroll protection application, but they can apply themselves in much the same way as you can.
And thanks for that that clarification. And if for whatever reason, as you mentioned, you don't have an existing relationship with a bank of any form, I would encourage you to follow the directions that were just given. But I also would encourage you that there's an organization called SCORE that might be helpful as well to you. The SCORE organization is a network of volunteers that are experts in business and are able to mentor people like you and help you. They might be able to help you get through not only this, but also ideas of how to grow and sustain your business as well. And you can access where your SCORE organization is or your SCORE chapter is by going to our website. And again, the website is Houlihan, HOULAHAN.house.gov. And then there's a /services/small-businesses. And if that's too hard to remember, if you just go to houlihan.house.gov, there's a banner which is up top that has a button that you can press for small business. And we'd love to connect you with SBA help, but also with SCORE help as well. One of the things that's pretty remarkable about this PPP program is just how broad it is and how inclusive it is about the very, very smallest of businesses. And so it's pretty innovative. It is not without its flaws, certainly, and not without kind of flaws in terms of rolling it out. But as you can imagine, as we mentioned here, it's been a monumental lift on the part of a lot of people to make this possible, and we would definitely encourage you to investigate how you can take advantage of it. Connor, do we have any other questions?
We do. Rochelle, thank you for your question. And again, a reminder to everybody on the line, please press 3 if you'd like to ask a question. Our next question comes from Michael. Michael, tell us where you're calling from and then ask your question, please.
Sure. Michael Baskin. I'm calling from Masterpiece Multimedia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Hi, Michael.
So I just have two quick things. One is related to the PPP on the timing and some modifications that are being made. So I was fortunate enough to get the PPP on the first round of availability and received that money. And when I received it, I was advocating to try and delay receiving the money and starting my timeline until I was permitted to reopen because, I understood the rationale for paying employees and getting them off unemployment, but if we weren't able to open, then we weren't functioning. So I'm basically in week 8 right now. My 8th week will be ending, and it's only the 2nd week I'm reopened. So 6 out of those 8 weeks worth of money is gone. It's paid to the employees, and now I'm understanding that there's modifications being made that would allow you to start utilizing the money once you reopen. So I'm a little bit thrown off here because I can't take advantage of that now because that wasn't in place when I received the money. So, we are reopened, but business is extraordinarily slow, and everything I kind of asked for because of that sounds like it's going to happen now, but I lost that opportunity by getting in on that early on. So I don't know if somebody could speak to that. The other issue is, and I talked about this last time on the town hall, is the business interruption insurance. I have been battling with my insurance company for weeks at this point. I've talked to several representatives, of which I've been told that the insurance lobbyists are hitting the representatives extraordinarily hard, and that's why this can't come to the floor. That's my money that I paid for my insurance for catastrophe and for interruption to my business, and I've been denied in every way possible by my insurance company, and I need some legislative action to ensure that I can get some of my money back that I absolutely need in order to make my business survive this pandemic. And that's my question, I guess, is what are you doing at this point to try to move that forward?
Sure, and I can absolutely hear the anxiety and frustration, Michael, in your voice. And as you know, we've been trying really hard to adjust on the fly, and something that none of us expected, and make it as flexible and dynamic as possible. And thank you for your ideas and for bearing with us. It certainly has taken time to make sure we get the PPP program right. One of the things I'm trying really hard to do, I serve on the Small Business Committee, and we actually just have a hearing on interruption insurance exactly for this reason, because we have heard pretty consistently that people understandably didn't quite understand that their insurance didn't cover for pandemic, but understandably are frustrated that it should have. And that it means that we will absolutely be thinking about that and trying to figure out how we can fix that. And hopefully we will find our way bipartisanly to be able to address that, and also to address issues like liability as well. That's something that we've been hearing as people sort of peek their heads up and try to reopen. A lot of businesses are concerned, understandably, about liability issues, about bringing customers and employees back too. So those are some of the things that are kind of at top of mind on the Small Business Committee in Congress that we're working on as we try to modify the existing PPP and adjust it. But I would love to kick this over to our SBA friends to talk about, I don't know if Steve or Mike, which one of you is still on the line, but to talk about the adjustments through the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act that may be helpful for Michael, as we have expanded it from 8 weeks to 24 weeks and from 2 years to 5 years as an example. If there's any flexibility there, it would be helpful to him. I think you might be on mute, whoever is maybe answering.
Yep. Hey, this is Mike Kane. Steve, are you still on? I think you had texted me that you wanted to provide some feedback. Okay. And Michael, this is Mike Kane, Deputy District Director, and I certainly understand, the frustration that you're feeling, and from everything that we have right now, I don't think that we have a way to make any modifications specific for you in terms of the guidance that has been released related to the recent flexibilities is really designed for loans that are approved for the most part after June the 5th. So I understand your particular situation, and unfortunately, there's not much that we're really able to do on that front. Although I can tell you, in terms of the 2-year versus the 5-year, that is something in terms of a maturity for a loan. Let's say that if there was a portion that you used that wasn't forgiven for one reason or another, you could certainly work with your lender, to extend the maturity from 2 years to 5 years, since you obtained the loan prior to June 5th. But unfortunately, the remaining, flexibility, it's specifically right now for loans that are approved after June the 5th.
And the other thing that I would add, Michael, is that I'm part of a group in Congress that's called the New Dem Coalition, and it's a very large caucus of people who caucus about pro-business, pro-entrepreneurship, pro-opportunity. And this was a concern of ours early on, with different parts of our country certainly will be affected differently. And as we know, here in southeastern Pennsylvania, we've been kind of in this position a lot longer than much of the country, and frankly, much of the state as well. And so you're right, we've been particularly hard hit by this. There was a lot of conversation in the HEROES Act, and hopefully to be included in the Senate version of this, that there would be sort of thresholds or the ability for people in different parts of the country to have different considerations, perhaps being able to go back again for a second PPP loan as an example. That did not make it into the legislation that was in the HEROES Act, but we we are actively looking into figuring out whether or not we should have the ability for people to go back for another bite at the apple, so to speak, and to be able to get a second tranche of money, which I think would be particularly appropriate in places like this. And so I will take this back as another, validation of what it is that we in the New Dem Coalition were asking of the leadership of the House, and hopefully we'll see from the Senate as well, to provide these kinds of scenarios and situations more flexibility. Michael, will you please contact our office so we can potentially work with you on talking to you through that kind of idea?
All right. Thank you, Michael, for your question. And our next question comes from James. Just a reminder, please press, we've got a few more people in the queue. Press 3 if you have a question. James, you should be on the line now. Just let us know where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Jim Sloan from Plastech Coatings. I have a question regarding the extensions. I also got the loan early on, and we used the loan planning on exhausting it over 8 weeks, and the census date for the headcount being June 30th. And I understand that's been extended to 24 weeks and or December 31st. Now, is that an either-or situation? We spend the money within 8 weeks and the census count is June 30th versus spending it in 24 and the census date is 12/31? Or do we now have the flexibility to spend the money over any time period between 8 and 24 weeks and do the census count anytime between June 30th and December 31st? And then the second question I have is I've seen in the press a fair amount of noise about revealing the recipients and the loan amount of the PPP loans. I personally have no issue at all with our firm's name being listed. I am concerned, though, that it does give away competitive information because the amount of the loan was based on 2.5 months' salary. So anyone who sees a company's name and the recipient amount theoretically has a pretty good idea of what the payroll at that firm is, and that could be considered a trade secret. So is there anything going on in Congress as far as what is actually going to happen and what is not going to happen along those lines?
So I'll take a crack at answering the second part of your question and then turn over to Mike for the first part about timelines and deadlines and dates and things like that. In terms of the transparency of where the money has gone and who has received it, Congress is very interested, as it is our job and it's our constitutional obligation for oversight. We're very interested in who's received the loans, not necessarily exactly how they've been apportioned, but that they've been apportioned or given out in the spirit of the legislation and in the spirit of the SBA's outline of what should happen. And so we are interested in making sure that the taxpayer dollars that we're putting out are being appropriately spent. And so we have been pushing, at least on the House side, at least through the Small Business Administration, in our communications with the administration to make sure that we have that transparency. But we're also trying to recognize that small businesses are small businesses, and it's hard for the kinds of accountability that a larger business might be able to afford. So we're trying to make sure that we respect the privacy of business owners, we respect the proprietary nature of a lot of their data, but we're also trying to make sure that we're beholden and accountable to our taxpayers as well. And so I'm not exactly sure how that will all land. We had, as I mentioned, a hearing recently on the other issue, but we also just had a hearing on transparency of data as well, asking how we could figure out how to turn these loans into forgivable grants as quickly and as easily as possible for people so that it wasn't a difficult process for people, while also respecting that the money that provided to those businesses came from taxpayers, and we want to make sure that taxpayers believe that that money was appropriately spent. So it's a careful balance that we need to take. The other thing that's really important for me to do in my responsibility and my job is to recognize that, God, I hope we never have to do this again. I hope we never have to implement the PPP or EIDL programs again. But if we do, I hope that we do it more expediently, more quickly, with a lot of lessons learned. And so part of what I'm trying to make sure that we do is understand who got the money in gross, generalizations of industries and that sort of thing. How did that money get used? How can we make sure that it gets to the people who really, really need it? And how can the next time, God forbid, that we're in this position, this happens, that we make this be able to be more of a flip of a switch rather than the ramping up that we needed, understandably needed this time around. So I'll turn over the conversation to Mike. I know Steve is having some technical issues. Maybe he's back on too, to talk to you about the question you had about your timelines.
Sure. And this is Mike Kane. So in terms of, the timelines, part of the question is going to be, when the loan was approved and dispersed. So, loans that are before June 5th basically would need to follow the 8-week time frame. Any loans then that would be June 5th and after have the option to go either 8 weeks or to utilize the 24-week flexibility, that you've read about. So, and in terms of taking a head count, that is available now for everyone. That the time to return to a pre-pandemic head count would be as of December 31st. 2020. So, I think that's a recognition, that, many businesses have not been able to, make their way back, to a full operating level. So, providing that level of flexibility then means that, more businesses are going to be able to take advantage of the amount of loan forgiveness as a part of that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Lawrence. And just a reminder, we've got a few more people in the queue, but press 3 to ask a question. Lawrence, you should be on the line.
Sure. Thanks so much for hosting this. I live in Stratford. I started a company called Lightning Packs, for which we were successful to get a PPP for our one employee. I spun off a second company called Hoverglide, which makes a different product. And I guess I had two questions. We don't have a payroll for Hoverglide. I'm the only employee, and we have not been net positive so far. Is it still possible to, this may be a stupid question, I apologize, to treat myself as a self-employed person on Hoverglide and write a PPP for Hoverglide? That's one question. The other one is, can one add more people onto a payroll at this point, or they had to be working there in February 2020 to March, wherever those dates are?
Those are terrific questions. Would love to hear from Mike on some of the nuance of the opportunity that he has.
I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of a tricky question, so I may need to have you repeat. In terms of I think the first question was, if you are the only employee and you aren't cash flow positive, are you still able to apply for the PPP program? Of course, because the program is designed to provide, for payroll based upon, your historical payroll over the course of 2019. So, even if you haven't necessarily been profitable, you have been, paying your payroll. So that's what you're going to utilize, as the basis, for that. Obviously, if you have a situation where, as a self-employed individual, where you really didn't have any profits for 2019, that's or very little in terms of profit, that is going to impact how much you're able to apply for in regards to PPP. However, what I have been doing is instructing folks that are in those particular situations that what they should be looking towards is perhaps an idle advance, which is the up to a $10,000 grant. If you're self-employed, you qualify at least at the very minimum for for $1,000 on that. If you have employees, you'd qualify for an additional $1,000 for each employee as a grant, and so forth. So there are some options there, but obviously if you're self-employed and for the end of 2019, you really didn't have any profits or something to that effect, that's obviously going to be challenging, from a PPP perspective. In terms of employees,
Mike, I just before you move on to that question, I have one point of clarification. It sounded almost from Lawrence's description that perhaps, and I've been in this situation myself when growing a small business where I didn't take a paycheck myself for years, but I did have revenue, and my question is, it sounded like you were sort of aiming him at EIDL as an opportunity and an option. Is that what you were saying in a situation where, for instance, PPP has a certain percentage, a large percentage that needs to be about payroll? If you're not in that position where you are the only person and you're not paying yourself because you're a startup, is EIDL the place where you should go?
Yeah, we apply for an EIDL advance, because it's grant money, and if your business has been impacted, and just about every business out there has been, I would encourage you to do that. In terms of PPP, I think it just kind of depends on what your business. Folks that aren't necessarily paying themselves a paycheck, and those folks that are set up as sole proprietors, for example, if they have profits for 2019, they're able to utilize that as a basis to basically provide a de facto payroll. In other words, there was still money, if you will, that went to them or could go to them, and they can utilize that, to apply for a PPP loan. Obviously, if they didn't have those, that's going to be inherently more challenging from the PPP perspective, in which case I would direct them more to the EIDL program, correct?
Excellent. And I feel as though there was a second part of the question. And before I make sure that we answer the second part, I wanted to reemphasize SCORE is another organization that would be helpful to help us, people like you, Lawrence, to understand which loan makes the most sense for you guys. Lawrence, did we get to both of your questions, or was there a second part that we didn't answer?
Oh, sure, yeah. The second part is, with changes in PPP, can one add an employee now who is not on the payroll in 2019 or February 2020 to March 2020? I mean, has that trigger changed with the new version of the PPP, or do we have to go back to what occurred in the beginning of 2020?
So I'm not 100% sure if I'm able to fully answer that question, because I've never gotten that question before, and I haven't seen it necessarily addressed. Because everything that we've been seeing has been focused on, being able to, rehire folks, not necessarily add, new employees. So that's something I'm going to need to research. And if you can send that question over to Congresswoman Houlihan's office and they can route it over to me, I'd be happy to do some research and see if I can get you an answer on that.
And Mike, would you mind sharing just contact info for people on the line that they can get in touch with you or with SBA in general?
Sure. So my district office main line is going to be 610-382-3062. All right, and anyone can give a call in. I have a great administrative person who is taking all of our incoming calls and making sure that everyone gets a prompt response. If anyone has any direct programmatic questions, they can email me directly at michael.kane, Kane, at sba.gov.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. And just a reminder to everyone, you can also contact our office in case you need to get in contact with the SBA or have any specific questions. With that, we are out of time. I wanted to remind everyone, though, like I said, please email us with questions. We have a small business rapid response team With that, I'd like to hand it over to Congresswoman Houlihan for closing remarks.
Thank you. I think I'm off of mute. Connor, can you hear me?
We can, yes, ma'am.
Excellent. I'm very, very thankful for the conversation. I'm certain that there were a couple people still in the queue, and if you are in the queue, please do reach out to us via email so that we can make sure to answer your questions for you individually. Thank you for joining the conversation, and thank you, of course, to those who were expert participants for taking time to educate us. We have offices, as you probably recall, in Reading and Westchester and DC in normal times. Right now, our offices are closed but are open in the sense that all 18 of our staff is working remotely and very, very diligently to address this pandemic, as well as the work of the people that is normally ongoing. We are working very much to protect the communities and to make sure that we have clear and consistent guidance during this very, very difficult time to make sure that your health as well as the health of your business is being taken care of. I do want everyone to understand that we are very much interested in connecting with you. Encourage you to please check out the website, as I mentioned, houlihan.house.gov. There is a small button on the top of the banner that says Small Business Help, but there is also a button there for help in terms of unemployment as well as rebate checks. Also, houlihan.house.gov/services/small-businesses is another special area where you can get a lot of information. Again, our email is pa06.smallbusiness@mail.house.gov. And as I mentioned, if we didn't get to your questions today, please do follow up with us so that we can give you an answer. And even if we did get you an answer and you'd like follow up on that, please do reach out to us through that. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to continuing to have this conversation, although I hope there will come a day where it is no longer necessary. So please, on behalf of us in our office, please stay safe and be well. Thank you.